So I kind of want to react to this today. This is obviously Bill Belichick, and he's talking about a lot of different situations on Pat McAfee's show. But what I want to really home in on is he's kind of breaking down the whole concept with Jamar Chase, with Brian Ayuk, with CeeDee Lamb, where you have these really expensive wide receivers and they want to get paid, and how do you go about it as a team? Now, he speaks from his personal experience when he played for the Patriots. He coached the Patriots, so keep that in mind, but he does say something interesting, and there's a couple segments I do want to play and kind of give my thoughts and opinions. This is the first one right here. He's talking about when the players go to practice and either hold out or they hold in, meaning they refuse to practice, number one, or they just don't go to practice altogether. Listen to what Coach Bill has to say about this.
Washington. So I think as a coach, you just have to, take the cards, the way they're played and try to, make the best of it. I think if the player comes in, like Judon did this last year, he came to training camp and effectively didn't practice. But Matt was going to play last year, and so he worked and trained hard on his own until we were able to resolve the contract. My position was, we're not going to negotiate with you if you're not working and you're not here. So if you leave, then that's a really bad precedent as well. If he leaves, then start giving him money. That will have everybody out.
And that's something that he does kind of home in on a lot in this video, is the idea of, well, if you give it to one player, then you're going to have a bunch of other players who also want the same treatment, right? Especially when it's a non-quarterback position. Now, he does say in this video that it's actually really easy when your quarterback isn't the problem, meaning your quarterback isn't making crazy money. He does allude to Tom Brady in that aspect. But one thing what he just said that I really thought was interesting was the fact that he said, if you're not practicing or you're not, in training camp working, they're not going to negotiate with you. They're not even going to talk to you. They're not even going to work with you, because if you're not working, I'm not going to give you money. If you're holding in, I'm not going to give you money. If you're refusing to play, I'm not going to give you money, because, as he says, it does set a bad principle, because then everyone's going to hold out. Everyone's going to refuse to play until they get paid. Now, overall wise, it is an interesting scenario, and he does kind of allude to this a little bit more in the next clip here, where he says that usually when a player has 2 years left of his contract, like Judon did, obviously Jamar Chase as well, what you usually do is you kind of ask them, well, what do you think you're worth? And depending on how much they think they're worth, then you use that money to put toward incentives to try to get them to that number as close as possible. So for example, if the player is making, $10 million a year, and he says, I want to make 15 a year. You say, okay, well, you want to make an extra 5 million. We're not going to pay you an extra 5 million, but what we'll do is we'll put incentives. And as long as you had the season you had last year that we actually really happy with, we're going to pay you based on that. And that's kind of what he said he did with Judon. Obviously, Judon had an injury, and kind of how he would work this whole situation where it's like a player has 2 years left on his contract, but he wants to get paid, and you're like, no, because as he alludes to later in this actual video, he does say how that sets a bad principle for pretty much every single player, because the second you pay one guy when he has 2 years left on his contract, aka Jamar Chase, then you're going to have a bunch of other players coming out of the woodwork and asking for, to get paid when their contract's not up yet as well. Listen to this part of the video.
Everything to make sure that there's no issues with their contract, then that makes it, a little bit easier with everybody else. And everybody else can, respect the overall team concept and the team goals. Not saying they want to play for nothing. That's not the point. But to try to find some way to compromise to work it out.
And right there, he's talking about when the quarterback gets paid, not nothing, but they get paid very little. The rest of the team isn't sitting there saying, oh, I should get paid 7-8 times the amount. Because at the end of the day, my quarterback's not making crazy money either.
Talk about Tom Brady there with his contract not being a deal. out throughout the rest of the contract. Now everybody, that became like, that's
Jamar didn't take that same, I think the Cincinnati situation is interesting. Higgins came in there, signed his tender right away, basically said, hey, I'm playing football. I'm going to go out there and have a good year. And Jamar didn't take that same, approach, similar situation. So it's, I don't think there's any cookie cutter deal here. Each guy and each agent has their own, strategy for what they think is best for them and their player. Again, I think when you start at the top with a guy like Mahomes,
and that's, again, as he does say, which is very true, is every single situation is different. But again, the general principles kind of get followed by a lot of different teams. And the principles that he's speaking of is kind of the universal principles, I will say, for a lot of different teams out there, where it's like, okay, well, if I pay this guy with 2 years left on his contract, now another guy is going to come out of the woodwork in 1 or 2 years, new contract with 2 years left on his contract because he doesn't feel like he's getting paid enough. And we saw that this offseason. Trey Hendrickson, he has 2 years left on his contract. He wants a new contract because he feels like his contract he just agreed to isn't enough money. And then also not longevity-wise, he wants some security. And then there's also Jamar Chase now who wants a new contract. He has 2 years left on his contract. He wants a new contract. And then it's going to continue the cycle down and down. I'm not saying in any way we should not pay Jamar Chase. I think 100% we should pay Jamar Chase. But this is the mindset of most coaches and might be the reason why Jamar Chase has not gotten paid yet. And, Bill here, I feel like he kind of has that same mindset a lot of coaches in the NFL have, where it's like, okay, if we do this, it's going to set a bad principle, and then we're going to have a whole bunch of problems. But overall wise, it is what it is at the end of the day. Hopefully Chase does get paid sometime soon. Hopefully get things figured out, because this is a Super Bowl season. So let's go, boys. Who dey?